This is the Haval H6 Ultra Hybrid, but it's not like the ones we've driven before, notwithstanding the plug-in hybrid that Tom Baker took for a spin, because this is the first non-plug-in H6 to feature the new AT1 suspension tune done by suspension whiz Rob Trubiani. That means this car has now been localized for Australian conditions, and hopefully it's made a big difference to how the Haval H6 drives, and hopefully that means it's much easier to recommend. That's exactly what we're going to be finding out in this video, and I think we're just going to cut the flab and get straight out on the road and tell you what this thing's like to drive. Chasing cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
We've driven a fair way out of the city today. We've come up to Wiseman's Ferry Road, just outside of Sydney. If you know the area and you're from Australia, you might be familiar with it. We like to use it quite a bit for testing of cars because it's a really good mix of challenges. You've got mid-corner bumps, tricky cambers, you've got humpback bridges as well that can really upset a car, and it's a good little way to get deep under the skin of a vehicle you want to know a little bit more about. And that's exactly the case with the Haval H6. Now, first I'm going to establish the problems with the H6 before the retuned suspension, because I think it's important to set those sort of standards, and then we can talk about how far this car has come. So first of all, the old Haval H6 was pretty wayward. It was a very busy car in terms of ride and handling. It was always doing something, and that thing wasn't particularly what you'd expect of it. There was also this feeling of disconnection through the steering and chassis, like the body bushings and the suspension bushings are too soft and just don't transmit the road feel that you kind of need to feel confident in a car. Now, what's changed on this car is all down to basic suspension stuff. So that is spring, damper, and also steering calibration. There are no wholesale changes to geometry or to bushings as far as we're aware in the AT1 tuned Haval H6. The person who did that tune is of course Rob Trubiani, who is well known for his hard work on the VE Commodore chassis and being a bit of an all-around Australian suspension whiz. Now, has he managed to pull it off? Has he made possibly one of the worst driving medium SUVs into something that is genuinely good? The answer is yes, if we're talking basic ride and handling. It is so much calmer than before. There's a lot less motion in the body when you're driving this car down the road. It sits flatter both in town, on the motorway, and out here on a country road, and all of those things are really good improvements. I think the suspension action is a little bit quieter as well, and the steering feels a bit more faithful. Problem is, at the end of the day, Rob is still working with quite an old car. The Haval H6 isn't new in Chinese car terms. It's certainly something that has aged, as has this platform, and I think there's further to go, because the more you ask of this car, the more it starts to fall down. I'll demonstrate it here as we come through a set of corners. I'm going to treat this first bend as a normal driver might. Nice steady state drive through here, turn it in, wait for the roll, and accelerate through there smoothly. Pretty decent. Problem is, I don't have much feeling as the driver to inspire any confidence. So when you start getting bumpier turns and going a little bit faster, as you might do if you had misjudged a corner, things start to get a little bit ragged. And this is really where the problem lies in the H6, because it's when you ask more of it, you realize that there's only so much you can do with this car. Of course, you're not going to be driving like I was just then all the time. Absolutely not the case. And so for the average motorist who spends a lot of time in town, away from country roads and nasty mid-corner bumps, I think this is a really big improvement. Unfortunately, the other cars we've tested on this road are just better at dealing with these tricky challenges and, importantly, give you more confidence as the driver. There's still a very disconnected feeling to this car. It's difficult to judge corner entry speed and difficult to know how much grip you're going to get, because sometimes you get quite bad understeer, sometimes you get a really lovely neutrality, and sometimes you get slightly alarming oversteer, and sometimes you get all three of those things in one corner. And I think that speaks to the fact that this car really is in need of replacement if it's going to compete with the best in class. We need geometry changes, we need higher quality components, and we need things like bushes to be set up for Australian road driving, which is more demanding than it is in a lot of the other parts of the world. Because in essence, as we come over this large humpback bridge, you'll see that the damping quality is much improved. with all that out of the way, let's talk about the more regular driving aspects of the H6 that have bugged us over this test, because it mainly comes down to calibration. Things like the brake pedal, which is quite soft and light, which makes it easy to overbrake initially and then very hard to modulate afterwards. This is an especially big problem when you are parking around town, just maneuvering, doing U-turns, as I'm about to do now. It's just not a particularly smooth, easygoing vehicle, and I think it would be easy to make passengers feel a little bit car sick. It just, yeah, tricky one to get right on the brakes. The other thing is the powertrain calibration with this dedicated hybrid transmission. I'm gonna go flat out now, and there's not much power. And then we get a burst of power, and then it sort of runs out of puff a bit, and then it picks up again. It's a bit strange, and it makes it difficult to judge just how much response you're gonna get out of this car when you're doing an overtake, or even just nipping through traffic. Again, it's that confidence thing I come back to with this vehicle that needs refinement. Then it comes to adjusting the settings in this car, which a lot of can be done through voice control, unfortunately not drive mode. And so if you're wirelessly mirroring Apple CarPlay, you have to tap through the screen here. GWM, no, the voice controls come up, go away. And then through there I can change from normal to sport to eco and to snow. Honestly, my preference is just normal. It doesn't really affect the car going into sport. It's very hard to get into the mode sometimes. It sharpens the steering up a little bit and makes it feel a little perkier under the throttle, but ultimately this is definitely best left in normal. There are some other settings as well. Dynamic steering torque control, which is the make the steering worse button, as far as I can figure out. And then there's also adjustments for the energy recovery level, low, medium and high, and there's also a one pedal mode, but I found the responses again to be just inconsistent. It takes a little while, so that's me slowing down, get back on the throttle. There we go. It takes a good half a second to a second sometimes to really register your inputs and do something with them. So they're my complaints with the Haval H6. And I think it comes down to Rob's done a great job with what he has available to him. The AT1 definitely improves this car in myriad aspects, but the fact of the matter is that it needs a new generation model to come along and correct the wrongs that are underlying with this chassis. It's a very similar finding to what we had in the plug-in hybrid, but here with front-wheel drive only, 179 kilowatts and a claimed 530 newton meters of torque, which never feels really like this car has those outputs. I think it just needs an extra layer of calibration to everything else. So we're on the right track, we're moving in the right direction, and this is definitely a better, calmer, smarter buy than the previous pre-facelift, pre-suspension tune H6. But if it was my money, looking out there at what else is available for about $40,000, I'd probably go and shop a little more broadly before signing on a dotted line. With the driving out of the way, we'll talk about the interior, starting with the good stuff. Now remember, this car is $39,990 drive away for this ultra hybrid. And for that, this interior really does show a lot of equipment, and it feels a little bit special. Things like the sunroof above my head, the black vinyl upholstered seats with heating and ventilation, and I will point out that it is absolutely worth going for the Ultra because you get the 3-stage ventilation, which saves these seats from being too sweaty. You have a big 14.6-inch touchscreen. You have lots of clever practicalities, 2 cup holders here, nice odds and ends storage spot, really good place to store your phone for while it's wirelessly charging. Fairly deep center bin here, nice little mezzanine extra storage area, door bins that actually have a little bottle holster that aren't too bad, and a sense that there is a bit of squidgy softness everywhere that you might not expect to find in an SUV at this price. So the value proposition is really strong on first impressions. Problem is when you go digging a little bit deeper into this H6 and you realize things like the multimedia system are really quite clunky, they're slow to respond, and there are a lot of sub-menus for adjusting things in the car. When you're running wireless Apple CarPlay, it is difficult to access the HVAC system, and although there is a row of shortcut buttons down here, there's one that I think would have been really well implemented where this switch blank is. Remember, this is a very high-spec H6. I reckon this should have just been a shortcut to the HVAC menu that just has a little fan and says menu. Why not? That would just make things so much easier. Other problems include the driving position. These seats still sorely lack under thigh support. The steering wheel, although fatter than before, which I personally quite like, is laid back in a bus-like position, and for a taller person like me, I'm 188 centimeters, it's just not particularly comfortable. But the worst thing in this car that comes up for me every time I step into an H6 is the smell. And this is obviously a bit of a personal preference, but everyone here at the Chasing Cars office has commented on the particular plastic smell of this car. When I was riding in this car 4 up in the front passenger seat, it actually made me feel a little bit car sick just from the smell alone. So that's something that's absolutely worth testing before you buy. If you can live with all that stuff and a few of those usability quirks though, the Haval H6 Ultra really does offer a lot of kit for the money. The backseat of the H6 isn't too bad a place to be, but it's not perfect, so I'll cover off the negatives first. The windows don't go all the way down. There's scratchy materials up here, which I know for a $40,000 SUV isn't a big deal, but compared to rivals, they are quite obvious. They're also next to these cheap-looking Burmester imitation speaker grills, which are hooked up to a very average 8-speaker sound system, and I am lacking a little bit of under-thigh support, plus the door bins aren't much good. The rest of the back seat, though, is pretty well rounded. I have a lot of space here. I'm 188 centimeters tall, so yeah, pretty tall for a back seat, good knee room, really decent headroom under this full-length panoramic sunroof, and this does let a lot of light in, makes it feel airy and spacious, as does the cream headliner, and yet, because it's fitted with standard window tints, it doesn't get too horribly hot back here. You also have 2 air vents that are pretty well positioned above a USB-A and a USB-C charge port. That's the only USB-C in here. The fronts are both USB-A, which does feel a little bit old. The support of the bench, apart from the under thigh, isn't too bad. I like the incline. It matches my body shape quite well, and I can get nice and comfortable because I have a pull-down armrest that is nice and sturdy with a couple of spaces to store some bottles. Coming around to the back, I will touch lightly on styling. Look, this car isn't my bag, and especially not in this color, but I understand it's relatively proportionate and you may like it very much. I just think it looks a bit flabby and the track looks a little bit narrow for the width of the body. But I do like the updated GWM here, new look taillights, and the badging has simplified a lot since GWM Haval launched its cars in Australia. Power tailgate, of course, just one long beep, so not quite as annoying as Toyota RAV4, and it opens up to reveal what is a decent boot. 560 litres, relatively sturdy cargo blind here that rolls away quite nice and easily. Finishing doesn't seem too bad. You've got some wet storage areas off to the side, a boot light and a 12-volt socket, so those things are all pretty good. What's not so good, and is kind of a little bit unforgivable on a car that is tuned for Australian conditions, is the complete lack of spare tyre. No space saver, certainly no full sizer, because that's where all the battery gubbins sit, so you're just left with an inflation device. And for me, on a family SUV, it's kind of not good enough, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on that, so leave them down below. H6 hybrid fuel consumption is rated at 5.2 litres per 100 kilometres, and we saw 6 litres per 100 kilometres on test. The first service is due after 1 year and 10,000 kilometres, and thereafter intervals are annual and 15,000 kilometres, with cap price servicing totalling $2,065 over the first 5 years. The H6 is covered by a competitive 7-year and unlimited kilometre warranty. Budget Direct told us the median annual premium paid between the 1st of February 2025 and the 1st of February 2026 to comprehensively insure a new GWM Haval H6 was $1,669. Of course, everybody's situation is different and the premium will vary according to make and model and other things insurers take into account, such as your postcode, driving history, who drives the car, where you garage the car, and more. After driving this car on some of the toughest roads we know just outside of Sydney and around the suburbs, what do we think of the Haval H6? Well, the AT1 tune is absolutely a step in the right direction. It is so much more composed, so much more consistent than the old Haval H6, which just felt so ragged. Very similar to the plug-in hybrid then. The problem comes with the rest of the H6 package, where it's clearly a slightly older variation of Chinese car, 6 years old as it sits here, and that is a lifetime in Chinese vehicle engineering, where things have come so far in the last 5 years. You can see that in the multimedia system that feels a little bit clunky. You can also feel that in the way the powertrain responds. It isn't ultra smooth, and it's just not quite there. So while it's very exciting to see this car rides and handles much more consistently than before, still think there's work to do. With Rob Trubiani being embedded in the company now, however, we can expect better things from Haval. It certainly is a good first effort. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? And as always, thank you very much for watching Chasing Cars.